Welcome to the today's WIP Lightning Talk. This is the second of a series that we're going to have in the future. We're going to do it once a month, and today we have two guests. Christian von Essen, who talked to us about a book that he just published and what we can expect from the future now that the COVID has hit us. And then we have Dan Spuller, who works within cryptocurrency. So WIP Lightning Talks is a part of WARP, obviously, but within WARP we have these WARP important persons who support us by being members and by paying $10 a month to be able to be part of us. And one of the things that the WIP members can do is to come here and have a presentation about something they like, they find interesting. And the fact that a lot of us are very curious, we welcome, any ideas that you have as WIP members. And if you're not a WIP member, become one. So WARP Institute today has over 40,000 members, which is fantastic. And even more fantastic is the fact that we have members in 140 different countries. So we're growing, and this sort of the wish to make the future come sooner is strong. And privately, I have that right now. My hand is in a cast, so I want the future to come faster. But that's sort of a small thing. The bigger thing is, what's happening in society, what happens with corporations, what happens in politics. And part of that, I think Christian will, touch on. And Christian is a freelance journalist, editor. He writes for WARP. He's a copywriter and a podcaster. He has this podcast called Heja Framtiden. And he has also a book that's in the Swedish bookshops right now. The color is great because you really see it when you come in the bookstore. And the content is fantastic too. So, and to me, Christian, you are, a fact-based, optimistic person for real. And so, and you were really quick to catch the opportunity with COVID. And, we need to think about, how can we make things better around the corner? And I think we can. But you tell us, Christian. So please, welcome.
Thank you, Per. Yes, I'm Christian von Essen, Stockholm-based freelancer. I wanted to write a book 2020 about my future optimistic approach from doing the podcast, interviewing over almost 200 people, experts, futurists, scientists, philosophers. But then the pandemic struck, and I decided I could do something regarding this new future that fell upon us instead. So I went back to 20 of my most interesting interview podcast guests, and I asked them what happens now to the future. So I'm trying to distill 20 visions about Sweden after Corona. So that's what the book is about, and I will now try to summarize this book in 10 minutes, which may be as difficult as writing it, but we'll see. I'm going to just start off with the elephant in the room, at least for international viewers, the Swedish model, the Swedish strategy. It may seem apparent to people outside what we're doing, or it may not. But anyway, in Sweden as well, we have not been really sure what's happening. So everything is not clear. Everyone is not on board with this. But the people I have talked to, they believe that the Swedish strategy has been quite fruitful in keeping the economy open and keeping the trust to authorities, keeping the sort of society awake even during this crisis. So it's not over yet, and it does not mean that we're well prepared for this pandemic. But most of the people I talk to, they sort of embrace the sort of Swedish coolness that they have seen so far. One aspect that has been fairly discussed is the impact on climate and environment, which is the second point. And of course, with less travel, transportation, and shopping, we have seen a decline in 5 to 8% in CO2 reduction. Many people thought it would be even more. But one more tangible aspect of the pandemic or the slowdown in economy is the better air quality. So a lot of cities and countries have now discovered that they have a huge incentive to continue this change, this green recovery. It could be that a slower economy will lead to less investments in green technology, but we've also seen huge promises from EU leaders, from politicians, from enormous corporation CEOs to implement some kind of green recovery after the pandemic is over. And in Sweden, we have now passed a strategy on circular economy, which is quite ambitious. So there is an opportunity to make decisions a bit ahead of time when it comes to sustainability and climate change. So let's hope for that. Also, when it comes to the business side, there's a new playing field. Naturally, there will be a lot of bankruptcies, but some of the people I've talked to, they also claim that the economy needs a crisis every now and then to thrive. If we see the economy as a sort of organic ecosystem. And we will definitely see more interesting digital business models now. And we will need to see more creativity, sustainability, and digitalization in industries like retail, hospitality, etc., that are severely hit by the crisis. We will see a new way of working, more flexible way of commuting, and a sort of more forgiving stance on the office presence that have been so detrimental to many people around the world. We can hope for a more collaborative business environment as well. And let's not forget that during the last crisis in 2008, 2009, we saw the birth of companies like Airbnb, Uber, Square, WhatsApp, Pinterest, new digital business models. And I think we can hope for the same kind of rise again after this pandemic is over. Number 4, when we talk about existential risk, there's an increasing scientific field on that, and global catastrophic risks. It's about system design and improving our resilience to global catastrophic risks like pandemics. So it's not a question of if it hits, it's a question of when. And maybe we can use this new sort of interest in complexity that people are sort of getting now, and interconnectivity to build stronger systems on a national level, on EU level, on a global level, so that we can have a system that is testing, identifying, providing information, creating new vaccines, like a globally coordinated effort. And that had not been the case this time around. But the X-risk people, they see biorisk as maybe the biggest existential threat to humanity. So we really need to take this seriously. And maybe we were just lucky this time. Maybe this was the test. So let's learn, let's improve, and let's build a global structure around this. As I was sort of implying when it comes to climate and business, we also see a fresh start, not only for political reform and for business models, also see perhaps a fresh start when it comes to an individual perspective. Perhaps we can improve our reflection, find our purpose, passion, mission. Maybe we should change the slide here, or okay, there it is. And some people in the book talk about self-organizing communities like the solar punk movement, organized clusters of innovation and entrepreneurs, new collaborations, and mental maturity. I think if we want to see it as a fresh start, we can see it as a fresh start. And there are many opportunities to build new things that we didn't think of before. That's what a crisis can give us. Number 6, with this huge acceleration in digital behavior and telemedicine, like digital healthcare, a huge acceleration in testing facilities, improvement in biometrics, we may see a new paradigm when it comes to preventive healthcare, moving upstream to prevent root causes of diseases instead of working downstream, just curing them with more medication. So Hannes Sjöblad, a famous biohacker, he talks about this approach, and he thinks that this could be widely more accepted and accelerated after this pandemic because of the new set of resources we have. And he also wants to collect the genome for every person in Sweden and collect it in a huge database where we can draw conclusions to improve the lives of many, many people when it comes to chronic disease and cancer, etc. He also predicts that we will have toilet sensors that analyzes the urine for a couple of parameters to be sent to your iPhone or your tablet to make predictions on your health. So that's just a very interesting paradigm we're entering now. Let's look into that more in the future. Number 7. Many countries and companies have implemented laws and regulations for surveillance now during the pandemic, and it's good for the people, but it might be difficult to remove these laws and regulations after the pandemic is over. So we see now in society, in the debate, we see a bigger awareness of our integrity and the use of our data, our private data. So we need more transparency, we need more accountability. And I talked to Anna Fellander from AI Sustainability Center here in Stockholm, and she stresses that these efforts are more important now than ever to make sure that we're on the right track and to make sure that the tech giants are being held accountable for the use of private data. And also when it comes to AI alignment, which is a huge issue in the far future maybe, this is a good place to start. Number 8. Yeah, one thing that's interesting in writing this book was to bring out the flaws in the system and society. So we have a couple of systemic challenges like inequality and racism. You often hear the claim that men are more affected by COVID-19, but in reality, women are working more part-time. They're working in retail, in beauty, in hospitality industries that are severely affected by the pandemic. We also see an increase in domestic violence during the lockdowns across the world. We also see cases of anti-Asian racism, anti-Black racism in Asia, all structures that are being left open because of the pandemic. We've also been anti-white racism in Africa. So the fear of the other has naturally grown stronger. It's nothing strange about that. But let's hope that the flaws that we see and that we bring out in the open can be sort of converged into improved discussions on more inclusive societies in the future, that we can use a more equal approach and more inclusive approach in creating politics in the future. So 9 is education. It's been a bit different across the globe. In Sweden, only the higher education and high schools, I think, were closed. But still, I mean, from a Swedish perspective, there were 1 million students that were suddenly relying on digital tools from one day to another. And in other countries, there was many more. But so there's an enormous boost in the edtech industry, educational technology. And these companies have been forced to invest a lot in platforms, in customer service, in new servers, in reliability. But they haven't really seen the money because they rely on sort of a freemium model. So, and the municipalities and school, they may not have been able to actually pay as much as they would like for these services. So, and there are no governmental subsidies in Sweden for these companies. So let's hope that we can nurture this amazing potential that the digital side of education has really shown us now during this pandemic. So there's an opportunity and a challenge to make it more, also to make it more inclusive education for everybody. But we also need to bridge the digital divide, and this is it's a more pressing area than ever, I think. Number 10, in conclusion, what many of my interviewees fear is increased polarization, nationalism, the breakdown of the European Union, who will pay for bad decisions made in another country. So we also see, I think, an increase in empathy. We see collaboration, we see solidarity, we see sustainability. So maybe we can actually hope that the world will be a better place after this crisis is over, because we have spent more time with family, more time with kids, more time in nature, many of us. And also there's the realization that we're all connected globally, and we're all fighting the same battle, we're joining the same cause. So maybe we can actually use this feeling, the sentiment, to improve the world moving forward. At least that's what I hope. So check out Vad händer nu med framtiden? 20 visioner Sverige efter corona. What happens now to the future? 20 visions about Sweden after corona. I kind of lost you now, actually.
Oh, there. One thing you said that catches me was like, maybe we were just lucky. So we need to sit up, pay attention, and be proactive in so many areas. And thank you. Very interesting. I'd like to talk a lot more, but we have to continue so that we don't go over time. Thanks. So now it's time to talk to Dan Spuller from Washington, D.C., active within the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative. And maybe we could add an 11th point to Christian's presentation, cryptocurrency built on the blockchain. And I'm really interested in lots of stuff, but cryptocurrency has been difficult to understand fully. And then when you say, okay, cryptocurrency, then somebody says, oh, you mean Bitcoin? No, not Bitcoin. I'm talking about cryptocurrency. So, and I know there are a lot of sort of building blocks for making this work. And so, Dan, please tell us more about it so we understand more how we can use that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Per, and everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. It's been, I've been proud to be a WIP these past few months, and I just want to start by acknowledging the work that the WIP Institute's doing to promote these positive news discussions across the world. As you mentioned, Per, my name is Dan Spuller, and I've been fortunate really to be a part of the greater blockchain conversation now for the better part of 7 or 8 years. And it's been both the government and the industry side. But today, I just want to talk about the future of money. You had mentioned cryptocurrencies, and that is certainly, from a historical standpoint, is very important to get a grasp on that. But it's a far larger ecosystem than I think many people realize. So in terms of the future of money, I want to cover digital money. Digital assets, blockchain-based technologies, and their associated platforms can be complex. But I believe they offer immense possibilities for governments, for businesses, for consumers. And this afternoon, I just wanted to provide you and the WIP community with a brief overview or taxonomy on 6 different forms of digital assets, 6 different types. I have them outlined in my slide deck, and it's impossible to cover all these specifics, but we're going to do as much as we can. I've spent a lot of time this year with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and while they're continuously updating their analysis and research, one thing is certain. Many nations across the world are now beginning to recognize the economic benefits and are helping this industry flourish. Whether it's introducing legislation to study and allocate funding for blockchain projects, or enacting legislation and creating national or state initiatives, these are all good developments. So, like many, I stumbled into this industry through Bitcoin. I was really an enthusiast and began in late 2012. And during the time, I was working for the North Carolina Department of Commerce in the United States. And in that role, I assisted in the development of the Money Transmitters Act of 2016. And that built a regulatory update to an existing law, and it officially defined the term virtual currency for the state. And we're seeing now a digital revolution taking place, certainly over the past decade. And this is especially concerning the creation of financial services supported by tech advances and computing power. At the leading edge of this innovation is, of course, the advent of crypto assets such as Bitcoin. And now everyone heard about this. So I'm not going to do a deep dive on Bitcoin today, but we're going to cover the general term of what I call and what the World Bank defines as a crypto asset or a cryptocurrency. So what is it? Well, put simply, a crypto asset or cryptocurrency is a digital representation of value made possible by cryptography and distributed ledger, DLT, distributed ledger technology. Bitcoin was the first example of what we call cryptocurrencies today. And this is a fast-growing asset class. It shares a lot of characteristics with traditional currencies, but the difference primarily is that they're purely digital. And the creation and ownership verification has to be based on cryptography. Other cryptocurrencies include Litecoin, Ether, Dogecoin, and many privacy coins like Zcash, Monero, and Dash. The next item, so that covers, in a nutshell, cryptocurrencies. The next one I want to talk about is tokens. And this is a bit more specific, but I found the easiest way to distinguish tokens is by saying that they are not a currency. You don't need to create a blockchain to issue tokens, which is a must-have for cryptocurrencies. But for tokens, you typically use an existing platform, an existing one such as Ethereum, which was originally created as a platform for smart contracts and later evolved into a currency. The ERC20 protocol by Ethereum is the most notable for tokens, and this was the foundation for nearly all the initial coin offerings that we saw. It experienced a very large boom in 2017 and 2018. It's still around, but it's not nearly as big as it once was. The best way I feel to find out whether a project is a cryptocurrency versus a token is to simply look at the project's website or the white paper and determine. Because I will say it's important to note the difference, because a lot of project teams themselves even confuse the two terms interchangeably. The next term I want to cover is virtual currency. So this has been around for a while. In 2014, the European Banking Authority defined virtual currency as a digital representation of value that is neither issued by a central bank nor is it necessarily attached to a fiat currency. This is quite different from some of the other definitions we're going to cover in a moment. And it's also, virtual currencies are frequently called fictional currencies when they have no official connection to the real economy. They're rapidly growing in the gaming space. Virtual currencies are very popular in multiplayer online role-playing games such as Fortnite and World of Warcraft. This is still largely a gray market for tax purposes, but exchanging virtual currencies or other virtual assets for real-world assets is usually forbidden by the games, the makers of the game's services. But we're seeing more and more of these traded on the secondary market, nevertheless. You know, whether it's eBay or they're selling virtual currency cards to get access to the V-Bucks, for example. So that's you'll hear that term quite a bit, especially in the gaming space. The next one on my list here is that I'd like to discuss is stablecoins. And this is perhaps one of the most popular digital assets we've seen gain traction in the last 3 years. But why is that? Well, the reason is stablecoins, they offer the best of both worlds. They're quite simple. Stablecoin is an asset that attempts to peg their market value to some external reference. Stablecoins are often pegged at a 1-to-1 ratio to a stable asset such as the US dollar, the euro, and which is held in reserve as collateral. They offer immense and instant processing payments like crypto, but on the flip side, they offer volatility. They're volatility free. And that's something that a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin does not offer. And stable valuations like fiat are very attractive through stablecoins. Examples of these stablecoins include USDC, TrueUSD, and Paxos. And then even JP Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world, recently developed JPM coin, which is a US dollar-backed stablecoin. We've all heard of Libra, which is Facebook's digital currency. That's another one. And Libra is fully collateralized by a basket of currencies and short-term debt obligations. So there are other types of stablecoins as well. Some of these are pegged to other cryptos or instead of fiat or commodities, and these are referred to as crypto-collateralized stablecoins. And the peg of these coins are maintained through over-collateralization and stability mechanisms. They're a little more complicated, but an example could be DAI, which is stabled by MakerDAO's ecosystem. It's very popular. And we're going to see a lot more of these continue to grow throughout the world. I think when compared to traditional fiat currencies, stablecoins present faster transactions and lower fees, and they're quite useful for everyday payments and international transfers. So that's a really interesting development I think everybody needs to keep their eye on. And then the last two I want to cover are very interesting as well, because they have similarities to stablecoins, but these ones are backed by central banks. And what do I mean by that? A central bank digital currency. So let's call it a CBDC. These are one of the fastest growing developments in the blockchain and digital payment space over the last 12 to 24 months. And what's really impressive is how much attention they're getting from governments and central banks. So let's break down what it is. A CBDC is a digital form of central bank issued currency, like the US dollar, and it's therefore legal tender. It's not to be confused with cryptocurrency, which is privately issued. And generally, cryptos, of course, are not backed by a central authority. That defeats the purpose of them. And a CBDC also can perform all these central functions of money. The key difference here is it's legal tender. It's a fiat currency, which means it can be exchanged dollar for dollar with physical cash. Households and businesses are going to be able to use these to make payments and store value as they now do with the government rules into the digital assets. And I think they saw the writing on the wall. So now they're creating a fiat-based digital currency. It's backed by a central bank, and it's licensed deposit-taking institutions on a sale basis, and that's currently only done with physical currency. But as I mentioned earlier, this is fast-growing. Just last month, Sweden's central bank, they released a 98-page economic review report that was devoted to this CBDC concept. And earlier this year, Sweden began testing an e-krona, which has taken the country a step closer to the creation of the world's first central bank digital currency. I think that's a very important development in the world that we live in right now. And just last week, I read that the representatives from the Bank of Thailand said they're also expected to have some key findings by the end of the year for a report on their central bank digital currency project. And they're going to begin testing it in a retail setting from what I read. Another version of a CBDC is what's called a synthetic central bank digital currencies. It's a lot to say, I know, but this is an interesting classification. And I think it's probably the one that'll have a little more promise than a government issued one directly. A synthetic digital central bank digital currency is a public-private partnership where we bring in a private sector company that issues the liability, and it is used by you and I to purchase assets for payments. But this liability is backed by central bank reserves. This is going to be most likely, I think, the choice of several governments because it's far cheaper and less risky for central banks. And it also allows them to use the full power of the private sector to innovate and interact with customers. So I think the government will issue an RFP, and it's already happening, to a private company to begin developing these, and then it'll be issued by the bank itself through the technology that's developed. So that about wraps up, my taxonomy here. But I just want to thank everybody also from WARP. By hosting these webinars and these sessions, the WARP Institute's playing a big part in engaging stakeholders, and we need to take the time to learn how these digital assets work, how these new developments and new technologies work, their strengths and their weaknesses, and how these attributes can create new opportunities is paramount. And so I think the best societies are built on entrepreneurship and innovation, and this is key to the continued development of useful tools for business, for government, and consumers. And I want to thank everyone.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. I'd heard of CBGB before, but not CBDC, and not synthetic currencies. So there's a lot to get your head around here. What do you think is going to be the point where we will be using and noticing cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based solutions in daily life?
Well, a lot of it's already happening. I think Bitcoin has been, almost institutionalized more from an investment perspective. A lot of folks are seeing that as the new gold. We're seeing tremendous amounts of institutional investors get into it, whether it's potentially through an ETF down the line or directly investment through like Grayscale. In terms of actual day-to-day transactions, a lot of people are actually not using Bitcoin as much anymore because they see it's too valuable. They're much more long-term holders. So I think a central bank digital currency, let's call it USD coin in the United States. Sweden's certainly ahead of the game. I think they're going to be out relatively quickly. But China actually is beating everybody to the punch. They're reportedly going to be developing and announcing a full-fledged digital dollar for their equivalent in the very, very near term. And that's going to change a lot. I think most citizens throughout the world within the next 5 years, I would say, are going to be actively using these like we do PayPal and Venmo today. Everything's going to be digitized.
Very interesting. Thanks. And you're a very, very good representative of the WIP important persons. People who are forward thinking, know something and want to share it with us others. And so thanks a lot for taking your time preparing and also doing this for us today. Thanks. So I think time to wrap things up. I would, maybe some sort of conclusion here is that business as unusual is a new normal, right? And both of these presentations shows that very clearly. And as WARP people, we really look forward to that, right? So that's why we're doing this. So if you're looking on YouTube now, you can actually subscribe to our channel, because we now have a channel. We're going to dig deep into that channel. And the next time we're having these talks will be the 18th of August. So we're inviting hereby, if you have something that you would like to say, if you're a WIP member, or if you're not a WIP member, become one, and then come and talk to us about what you would like to share. So this is part of, what we're doing. We're also doing, for the WIP members, we send out newsletters every week, and then we had events before COVID came, but we're going to have it again, and we're doing things like this. So please join us and add to this community that is growing very, very quickly. So thanks for today, and see you in August without a cast. Bye. Thank you.